Before I tell you how this turned out, let me ask you something. If this story feels familiar, tap like, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. Have you ever been labeled toxic just because you stopped tolerating disrespect? My name is Allison, I'm in my late 20s. For most of my life, I've been the one expected to stay quiet to keep the peace. When I left that night, I didn't slam the door. I didn't cry in the hallway. I didn't text anyone to explain my side. I walked down the stairs, stepped outside, and stood there longer than I needed to, letting the quiet settle. Being called toxic wasn't new. It was just the first time she said it out loud. For years, I had been the one adjusting. If she was stressed, I stayed calm. If she was angry, I stayed quiet. If she needed help, I showed up. I paid on time. I cleaned without being asked. I avoided conflict because peace felt more important than being right. That silence made people comfortable. It also made me invisible. In her mind, I wasn't contributing. I was just there. Someone who benefited. Someone who should be grateful. Someone easy to label when things felt inconvenient. I noticed how easily the word toxic replaced accountability. What she didn't realize was that I had never lived there casually. Everything had been structured. Every payment, every agreement, every responsibility had been documented. Not because I expected betrayal, but because I believed clarity protected relationships. She mistook my quiet for dependence. She mistook my patience for weakness. When I left, I didn't take furniture. I didn't argue about fairness. I took only what was mine and removed myself from the equation entirely. That was the moment people around her assumed I had lost. Friends heard her version first. Family nodded along. The story became simple. She set boundaries, I couldn't handle them. I let that story live. I didn't correct anyone. I didn't defend myself. I didn't even block her number. I stayed silent, watching how quickly confidence turns into carelessness when someone believes they're untouchable. From the outside, it looked like she had won. From the inside, I was finally free to let consequences work without interference. And that's something people rarely notice. Silence doesn't always mean surrender. Sometimes, it means you've stepped far enough back to let someone reveal exactly who they are. A few days after I left, her tone changed. Not toward me, toward everyone else. She talked louder. Laughed harder. Told the story like a victory speech. According to her, kicking me out was self-care. Calling me toxic was growth. She framed it as if she had finally chosen herself after years of being burdened. People nodded. Some even praised her. What they didn't notice was how often my name came up for someone who claimed she was done with me. She posted vague quotes about boundaries. About cutting off negative energy. About how peace only comes when you stop carrying people who don't deserve access to you. Each post felt rehearsed, not confident, but convincing enough for an audience that didn't ask questions. Behind that confidence was something else, relief. With me gone, she assumed everything had reset. No reminders. No shared responsibility. No quiet presence that balanced her impulsiveness. She believed removing me meant removing consequences. That belief made her careless. She started telling people details she shouldn't have. Complaining openly about finances. About how expensive everything felt suddenly. About how unfair it was that she had to handle everything alone now. She said it jokingly, but the cracks were there. At a small gathering, I wasn't invited to, someone asked her how long she'd lived in the apartment alone. She smiled and said, "It's always been mine." She was just helping for a while. That sentence traveled. Because there were people in that room who knew better. There were people who had seen me sign papers. People who had watched me organize bills. People who remembered conversations she assumed no one else had paid attention to. Still, she kept going. She bragged about standing her ground. About not letting toxic people stay rent-free in her space. About finally being in control of her life. What she didn't realize was that every exaggerated claim contradicted something documented. Every confident lie created a clearer timeline. Every public retelling made her version easier to dismantle. She believed confidence was power. So she escalated. She sent me a short message midweek, not an apology, not an explanation. Just a reminder. Make sure you've changed your address everywhere. I don't want anything of yours coming here anymore. I didn't reply. That silence made her bolder. She assumed I was embarrassed. Hurt. Regretful. She told someone I'd probably try to come back once I realized how hard the real world is. What she never asked herself was why I hadn't argued in the first place. Why I hadn't begged. Why I hadn't threatened. Why I hadn't tried to win. She mistook emotional restraint for defeat. Meanwhile, she was unknowingly stacking evidence against herself, timelines, statements, witnesses, all while believing she was untouchable because she had spoken first. There's a moment when someone thinks they've won so completely that they stop protecting themselves. That's when they reveal everything. And she revealed more than she knew, not to me, but to the situation she thought no longer involved me at all. From the outside, she looked powerful. From where I was standing, she was rushing toward a conclusion she hadn't read carefully. And I still hadn't said a word. By the weekend, it looked like I had lost. She posted another story online, smiling, holding a coffee cup, captioned, "Finally at peace without toxic people dragging me down." Everyone liked it. Everyone commented, "You're right. Cut them off. Good for you." Even mutual friends started forwarding her posts, praising her decisiveness, her strength. I didn't reply. Because from the outside, it looked like she'd won. I didn't have a home there anymore. My things were gone. My presence erased. She assumed she'd removed the problem entirely, me, the inconvenient truth. I walked the streets alone that day. The city felt quiet, almost comforting. I kept my head high, but inside, a strange mix of anger and patience settled in. Anger because she had humiliated me publicly. Patience because I knew this wasn't the end. I let her victory breathe. I let it make her complacent. By Sunday, I heard through mutual acquaintances that she had been boasting again, how she had dealt with toxic family and finally felt free. She hadn't even noticed that in repeating her story so often, she left gaps. Gaps where timelines contradicted her claims. Gaps where my calm, invisible record of responsibility would outshine her impulsive arrogance. Friends repeated her story to others without checking. Even I started to hear whispers, "Wow, she really stood up for herself. Strong move." And I stayed silent. Because silence wasn't defeat. From the outside, it seemed I had no leverage. She had control. She had the narrative. She had attention. But I had something she didn't, preparation. Every payment I had made, every form she thought she had signed alone, every quiet text or record of responsibility, all documented, all organized, all waiting. And she was walking right into a trap built by her own overconfidence. She believed she had removed me, but in reality, she had removed her own safety net. She had made herself public, arrogant, careless. She had ensured that when the right moment came, every piece of evidence would land exactly where it needed to, in front of her, in front of witnesses, and in front of the people who mattered. From the outside, she looked untouchable. From my side, she was exposed in ways she didn't even realize yet. And that calm, collected knowledge, knowing she thought she'd won, was sweeter than any immediate revenge could ever be. I smiled softly to myself that evening, walking alone. They all thought she was in control. They had no idea that the real game had just begun. I kept walking, watching the world move around me, pretending everything was normal. But it wasn't. I had already anticipated her arrogance. Every post, every boast, every smug remark she made had been noted. Every moment she assumed I was gone, I had recorded, saved, and organized quietly. From the outside, I was just a calm observer, a girl who walked away, silent, unnoticed. But inside, I held every piece of the puzzle. I didn't text her. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't even whisper to my friends what was coming. And that silence, that quiet patience, was my advantage. She thought she had control. She thought she had freedom. She didn't realize that control is fragile when it's built on assumptions, and freedom is temporary when it relies on someone else's compliance. I smiled slightly, knowing that patience and preparation always beat confidence built on ignorance. And while she celebrated a victory she didn't even earn, I quietly counted the days until the moment she would learn the truth, in the most public, undeniable way possible. She had no idea what she had just walked into. While she celebrated her so-called victory, I had quietly set things in motion. Every document she assumed was private, every payment she thought she controlled alone, every proof of my contributions, all meticulously organized. I had double-checked the lease agreements, utility bills, and online records. Every date, every signature, every financial detail was ready to expose the truth. I wasn't just a tenant who walked away. I had leverage, legal, undeniable, and completely hers to reveal. She had believed that leaving me out of her life meant erasing me from the narrative. She didn't realize that her boasting, her arrogance, and her careless social posts had created a timeline of evidence that would trace back to her mistakes. The moment she had assumed she could flaunt her control, she was actually making herself vulnerable. I had also quietly informed the property manager and relevant authorities about her oversights. I didn't need to be there physically. Her own disregard for detail and patience made sure that everything would unfold without my intervention. I had remained calm, because true advantage doesn't announce itself. It waits. It observes. And it acts only when the conditions are perfect. She believed she was untouchable because she had spoken first, acted first, and appeared confident. But confidence without verification, without accountability, is fragile. Every boast she made about cutting me off or being free of toxic influence would now be part of the story that proved her errors, her overconfidence, and her recklessness. And the beauty of it? She had unknowingly set up her own exposure. Every witness who had seen me handle bills, every conversation she had casually mentioned to others, every digital post she created would now contribute to her unraveling, all without me having to lift a finger. I didn't have to confront her. I didn't have to argue. I didn't have to explain. Because the truth, combined with preparation and patience, is unstoppable. And as I watched from a distance, knowing the pieces were in place, I felt a rare satisfaction, the kind that comes from knowing that the universe, or sometimes just careful planning, handles those who underestimate patience and intelligence. This was not revenge in the conventional sense. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't plotting public humiliation. I was merely letting natural consequences unfold, guided by evidence she had unknowingly created herself. And when the time came, everything she assumed she controlled would slip right through her hands. From the outside, I looked like someone who had lost. From the audience's perspective, now, the advantage was crystal clear. She had built her confidence on assumptions. I had built mine on facts. And facts, unlike arrogance, do not lie. I spent the next few days quietly observing her every move. Not stalking, not texting, not reacting, just noting. Every post she shared, every boast she made, every careless comment she left for her friends to see. I watched her believe she had control over the situation, blissfully unaware that her confidence was laying the groundwork for her own unraveling. I had already prepared all the documentation, payment records, lease agreements, communication logs. Each one was a piece of undeniable proof. I didn't need to threaten or confront her. I just needed the perfect moment, the time when her arrogance made her vulnerable enough that revealing the facts would hit with full impact. My plan wasn't impulsive, it was deliberate. Patience, not rage, was my strategy. I checked every detail. No gaps. No assumptions. Each document confirmed what I knew, that she had overstepped, misrepresented, and assumed she could rewrite reality by declaring me toxic and removing me from her life. Meanwhile, she continued to parade her perceived victory. She spoke openly about her freedom, about cutting out the toxic influence, and about finally controlling her own space. Every word she said was a confirmation of the leverage I held. Every boast made the reversal inevitable. I also quietly confirmed my legal standing with the property manager and relevant authorities. Nothing aggressive, nothing threatening. Just clarity. The moment she overstepped, the paperwork was ready to activate. She thought she had removed me from her life, she had actually set the stage for her own public mistake. Every action she took added to the momentum. Each careless brag, each public post, each casual remark to friends, all were recorded, all were noted, all were ready to be used as evidence. I didn't manipulate anyone. I just observed, prepared, and waited. I found a rhythm in the silence. While she boasted, I organized. While she assumed control, I calculated the exact moment for the reveal. Timing was everything. One wrong move, and the impact would lessen. Patience wasn't passive, it was active strategy. I didn't need to hurry. She had already created the perfect conditions for exposure. The arrogance, the overconfidence, the lack of awareness, all of it worked in my favor. And yet, I remained calm. Calm enough that if anyone had seen me, they would have thought I had lost. But in reality, everything was aligned. The narrative she had been telling herself and others was about to collide with reality in a way that would leave no doubt about who was right. I double-checked every detail, every document, every timeline. Then I waited. Because true intelligence doesn't rush. It doesn't act on impulse. It waits until the perfect conditions converge, until the audience, the witnesses, and the antagonist are all in place. And soon, the stage would be set. Publicly. Unassailably. And all her boasts, all her confidence, all her perceived control would crumble. Until that moment, I stayed quiet. I smiled when I thought about the inevitability. I walked freely, knowing that she had unknowingly created her own downfall. And all I needed to do was wait for the precise moment to let it unfold naturally. Patience, preparation, intelligence, that's how victory is won without rage, without confrontation, without error. And the best part? She had no idea. The day finally came when everything would converge in a public setting. She had organized a small gathering at her apartment, friends, a few neighbors, even casual acquaintances she wanted to impress with her victory. She posted about it online too, sharing stories about freedom, independence, and cutting toxic influences out of her life. Everyone who knew her, and even some who didn't, would see her in her element. I didn't announce myself. I didn't sneak in. I wasn't even on anyone's radar. But I was ready. I arrived at the building quietly, using a side entrance. Every detail had been planned, the timing, the witnesses, the sequence of exposure. The property manager, who had been unknowingly informed about the discrepancies in her records, was already waiting. A few neighbors, aware of her mistakes, were in the right place at the right time. And she had no clue that all of this had been quietly arranged. From the outside, it looked like a casual evening. From my perspective, it was the perfect storm. She greeted her friends confidently, laughing at the memories of toxic moments she had exaggerated online. Her arrogance was palpable, the very quality that had made her blind to the truths she had overlooked. I didn't react. I didn't make eye contact. I simply observed. Every boast, every laugh, every careless remark was recorded, noted, and timed to align with the impending reveal. And then, the first moment arrived. The property manager, calmly and professionally, stepped forward and asked a simple question: "Can we confirm who is responsible for the pending eviction notice?" Her smile faltered. She glanced at her friends, expecting silent support. She had believed her confidence would shield her from scrutiny. The room shifted. Whispers started. Eyes turned toward her. And she realized, slowly, that she was about to be accountable for every oversight, every misstep, every assumption she had made about her so-called control. I stayed quiet. I smiled just slightly, enough to convey calm assurance without saying a word. She was about to learn, publicly, that arrogance and assumptions do not equal victory. That preparation and intelligence, combined with patience, always outweigh careless confidence. And the audience, everyone watching, was about to experience the exact moment when the truth could no longer be ignored. From the outside, it looked like she was still in control. From my side, the reversal had already begun. She laughed again, raising her glass as if to toast her freedom. The room followed her lead, eager to celebrate her apparent victory. Then the property manager cleared his throat. "Actually," he began, holding up the folder I had quietly handed him earlier, "there seems to be a discrepancy in the records regarding the eviction notice." Her smile froze. She glanced around, looking for someone to back her up, but the expressions were unreadable. Friends were whispering, eyebrows raised. Neighbors were watching closely. And I was still standing in the background, silent, letting it all unfold. The manager continued. "The payments for the last 2 months were handled by Maya. She has documentation showing all contributions. The pending notice was sent in error, based on incomplete information that was, unfortunately, assumed to be accurate by the tenant currently residing here." Her eyes widened. She opened her mouth to respond, but the words didn't come. Every casual boast she had made about me, every story she had shared about being rid of my toxic influence, now stood exposed against tangible proof. Her confidence, so carefully curated over the past week, collapsed quietly but completely in front of the audience. One of her friends, a longtime neighbor who had quietly followed the situation, leaned forward. "Wait, so she's actually handled everything correctly this whole time?" The question hung in the air like a spotlight. She faltered. She could no longer control the narrative. Every post, every boast, every accusation she had made became evidence of her arrogance, not my failure. I stepped forward just enough to give a small, calm smile. No words. No explanations. Just presence. The room began to realize that her assumptions, that walking away meant defeat, were completely wrong. The evidence was irrefutable. Her so-called victory, her claims of freedom and control, crumbled in front of witnesses, the property manager, and anyone paying attention. Her voice finally came, trembling slightly. I didn't know. I thought. No one needed to hear more. The proof was there. The reversal was complete. And the truth? The audience, friends, neighbors, and even casual acquaintances now saw the stark contrast between preparation, intelligence, and patience on one side, and arrogance, assumptions, and careless confidence on the other. I didn't gloat. I didn't mock. I simply remained composed, letting the evidence speak for itself. That calm, collected presence amplified the impact. She realized, finally, that every boast, every attempt to control the narrative, had been her own undoing. She had created her own downfall by assuming she could erase me with words alone. The room went silent for a moment. Then murmurs spread. People whispered among themselves, connecting the dots. From her perspective, she had been confident, untouchable, victorious. From my perspective, she had set herself up for a public reversal that left no room for debate. The balance of power had shifted entirely. And the audience witnessed it, crystal clear. What she hadn't anticipated was how clean, logical, and irreversible this outcome would be. No yelling, no threats, no dramatics. Just undeniable truth meeting overconfidence in the most satisfying way possible. And I didn't have to say a word to make it happen. Her face drained of color. She stumbled over words, trying to explain, trying to reclaim some shred of authority, but it was too late. The room no longer saw the confident, untouchable sister who had mocked me. They saw a person undone by her own arrogance, a person whose assumptions and overconfidence had betrayed her in front of everyone. She had believed that cutting me off, calling me toxic, and celebrating my absence meant she had won. But the truth had a way of catching up, quietly, efficiently, and publicly. No one clapped. No one jeered. There was only silence. Silence that amplified every misstep, every boast, every assumption she had made. She realized, too late, that confidence without facts is fragile. I stayed calm. I didn't gloat. I didn't shout or point. I just stood there, composed, allowing the truth to settle like a weight everyone could feel. My patience, my preparation, my intelligence, all had done the work that rage or confrontation never could. She had lost her credibility, her standing, and her illusion of control. Her friends avoided eye contact. The neighbors exchanged glances. Even casual observers could see the shift, the balance of power had reversed. I didn't need to speak. My actions, my silence, and the facts I had quietly compiled were enough. She had taught everyone a lesson without me ever raising my voice. And then, quietly, I stepped back. I walked out of the apartment, the manager already handling the necessary corrections. Her mistakes were public. Her arrogance exposed. And I walked away unchanged, unbothered, and satisfied. Outside, the air felt lighter. The tension of the past week dissipated. I didn't need revenge in the conventional sense. I didn't need to humiliate or yell. I had let the situation unfold, and the universe, or careful planning, had delivered justice. As I walked down the street, I thought about patience and respect. How often people underestimate those who remain calm. How often arrogance blinds people to the consequences of their own behavior. And I smiled. Not out of malice. Not out of triumph over cruelty. But because the balance had restored itself. The lesson had been taught. The truth had spoken. She would remember this moment. Everyone would. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a quiet satisfaction, the kind that comes from knowing intelligence beats impulsive confidence, that patience beats rage, and that sometimes, walking away is the most powerful move of all. I didn't need her apology. I didn't need recognition. The world had seen the truth. And I could continue my life, unburdened, knowing that justice, when executed calmly and intelligently, is irreversible. Some lessons are best learned quietly. Some victories are best taken without fanfare. And some truths, once revealed, leave a mark that no arrogance can erase. I walked away, unchanged. Stronger, calmer, and completely at peace.